So is this a bad idea? Analyzing a stand-up special? It's weird. Stand-up comedy, not comedy in general, it's specifically stand-up, is probably the only medium where looking deeper into it makes you seem less qualified to talk about it to the average person. If you're really into looking deeper into movies or music or photography, people assume, usually correctly, that you must really love it. But if you look too deeply into stand-up, people think that you've missed the point so badly that you must be trying to destroy it. Stand-up is about being funny, full stop. And the best way to kill funny is to explain it, to subvert the intuitive involuntary process of laughter by saying shit like the intuitive involuntary process of laughter. I think this reflective rejection of looking too deeply into humor can explain why a lot of people can't stand when certain comedians try to make their sets about something deeper and more personal. They have a certain mindset about the ethos of stand-up being the release of tension, that it should be cathartic and distract you from life's problems, not be mired in them. A good example of this would be Hannah Gadsby's special, Nanette. Judging by the audience reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, this is either the most important special to ever exist, or the exact antithesis to the very concept of comedy. Negative reviews of stand-up specials are usually pretty simple, just a few different variations of "it wasn't funny" repeated over and over. There are certainly plenty of those, but you also see a ton of comments saying that they went into it expecting a comedy special and instead got a TED Talk, and that she was trying to make them sad rather than make them laugh. And hey, those comments are valid. Stand-up actually is supposed to make you laugh, and if you were bored or put off by a comic talking about their trauma or anything else you think is too serious, that's fine. You were looking to laugh, and this was just a downer. But then last year, Bo Burnham released a comedy special called Inside about how we all kind of wanted to kill ourselves during quarantine, and everybody loved it. Both of these specials, Nanette and Inside, approach comedy from a different angle than what a lot of people say they're looking for in a comedy special. Instead of focusing on the release, they lean into the tension to shift where our perception of release comes from. They fill our lungs with water, so we may better love the air. The difference is that even though Bo was talking about his own struggles, basically all of us could relate on a deep enough personal level that we were navigating towards the laughs from the same place he was. Not everyone could relate to Hannah Gadsby's experience of growing up queer in conservative Tasmania and using humor to cope to the point where she felt alienated from herself. Some of us could, though. We knew the roads and followed her to the same place. Also, Bo's a straight white dude and Hannah isn't, and maybe we're not as over that bullshit as some people seem to think. So comedy can explore dark topics, and deeply personal sets can resonate enough with people to justify approaching humor from a less traditional angle. Inside showed that even mainstream audiences can absolutely accept a comedy special that seems to go out of its way for long stretches of time to show the deeply personal struggles of someone working through the worst part of their life. But Inside wasn't a stand-up special. That kind of intimacy and personal exploration just wouldn't be a good fit on stage. Jerrod Carmichael's new stand-up special was directed by Bo Burnham and is exactly the kind of intimate personal exploration that made Inside a success, adapted perfectly for the stage. This special, titled Rothaniel, was released on HBO Max on April 1st, 2022. Not like as an April Fool's joke, it was just a Friday. It was the first I've ever seen or heard from Jerrod Carmichael, and it will not be the last. I gotta emphasize that I had no idea who this dude was before going in, so when I tell you that it hit me in the deepest parts of my soul, it came purely from his stagecraft in this special alone. First thing I noticed about the special was the way it was framed and shot. I'm not talking about the opening cinematography or whatever with the snowy backdrop of New York City and the jazz music. To be honest, I never care much about these little establishing shots comedians have at the beginning of their specials. No, I'm talking about how the camera positions him in the frame. He's very close, much closer, and for much longer spans of time than just about any other stand-up special I've seen. A comedian's body language is part of the performance, so even sets that are meant to be on TV use close-ups like this sparingly. But Rothaniel, especially in the latter half, is nearly entirely glued to every micro-expression on Carmichael's face. We're still getting the body language part of the joke, but now it's a subtle eyebrow raise, a quarter smirk, a swallow during a pause. A lot of other specials, especially with big-name comedians, are shot in such a way to emphasize the size of the venue and scope of the crowd, with a favorite opening being the comedian walking on stage in a spotlight against a sea of cheering fans. Nothing wrong with that, but it's very clear that Carmichael's special is going for a different vibe. When we do see the audience, they're very close to the stage. The ones in front look like they could reach up and touch him if they wanted to. The camera is often looking through them, at their level, framed in such a way that pulls audience and performer closer together. The fact that, from start to finish, he's sitting down on a cheap folding chair, usually with his elbows on his knees, diminishes that gap even further. The craft of directing stand-up specials goes well beyond simply pointing a camera at a comedian on stage, and Bo Burnham's direction here does a great service to the honesty Carmichael wanted to bring to this special. It's the basis for the jokes and the driving force behind the emotion he brings to the stage. If you're thinking, that doesn't really sound like a comedy show, I need to remind you, most comedy, on some level, is about looking past superficial expectations and norms to briefly recognize what's really going on. To arbitrarily divide comedy fans into two camps for a second, there's one group who would hear about a comedy special about how a young but not that young man has lived his whole life with secrets and lies, and the isolation that's resulted from that, and think, holy shit, that sounds like the exact opposite of comedy. And then there's another group who thinks, holy shit, I bet he's got some hilarious stories about that. This show is about things that exist but don't exist. Things that are right there, hiding in plain sight. It's a hard way to live your life, but a fantastic prompt for writing really good jokes. I think that's all I can really talk about without giving away specific jokes, so consider this my spoiler warning for Rothaniel, in the sense that you'll see more of the punchlines coming and therefore might find it less funny.
Things that exist but don't exist. It's things that like are right there, hiding in plain sight.
Jerrod opens the show by letting us know he wants to talk about secrets. One of those secrets, one of his last held secrets, is his real name, which he hates. He's gone through great lengths to have it taken out of his yearbooks, driver's license, any document or utterance that could bring his name to light. And it's all in spite of the fact that he's named to honor his grandfathers.
If you knew them, you'd know keeping a secret is the only way to honor them. Like, that's kind of who they were. There's no easy way to say your grandma was a side piece. It's
Both of them. Both of his grandfathers were cheaters. Not just cheaters, but prolific cheaters, doing the kind of cheating that James Bond couldn't get away with. You can't have 23 kids outside of marriage and keep it a secret. And yet, it sort of was, out of necessity. His mom's dad lived in the house he was cheating from, and everyone just kind of existed with the knowledge. They knew, but they didn't know. That's also the environment that Jerrod's dad grew up in. It's not just the notion that he could cheat and get away with it. It's the fact that on top of that, there's a pressure to look the other way. So even if you do get caught, it's almost just as bad to be the person that snitches. After all, if telling the wife about her husband cheating is what broke up the family, isn't the person doing the telling the one really responsible? It's a common abuse tactic because it works. So when Jerrod's dad grew up and started cheating on his wife, he didn't feel like he even had to try all that hard to be good at hiding it.
He was fucking my homeboy TJ's aunt. Which is a story TJ told me about. And that's hard, because for TJ, he didn't want to snitch. You know, it's just from, like, you're in the hood, like, you know, no matter who it is, I didn't want to snitch. And my dad, being caught under pressure, you know what he did? He just squinted his eyes, pretending he was somebody else.
So finally, well into his adulthood and successful career, Jerrod did what we've all done to set things right. He got really drunk and called his dad to air out the family's dirty laundry, and somehow that worked. His dad agreed to tell her, as long as Jerrod and his brother took her out to dinner first. A dinner where Jerrod was looking at his mother, knowing that these were her last moments before her world came crashing down around her. Next to a hibachi chef juggling pepper shakers with a group of strangers. These are the jokes I tend to like the most, the ones where people talk about the suffocating weight on their chest and how that changes their view of normal situations. Instead of taking something normal and adding absurdity to find the joke, they show how the normal can be absurd. But they get through the dinner and his dad keeps his word. His dad begged for forgiveness, and she gave it to him, and it's tough to say if that means it went well or not, but at least it was out in the open.
And once that was done, I was left alone feeling like a liar, because I had a secret, one that I kept from my mother and my father and my family, my friends, and you, all of you. Professionally, personally. And the secret is that I'm gay.
The reaction to this revelation, both from the audience and then Jerrod's reaction to that reaction, is the reason I wanted to make this video. Because that's still a reveal in 2022. Unless you talk and act in a specific way that has its own conversation to be had, straight is still the assumed default. Coming out is not something you do once. You do it with every person who doesn't know. Even electing not to tell them is often a conscious decision, either because you suspect they won't take it well, or because you know it will affect their perception of you, and that isn't fair. The crowd is silent for a few seconds before some start clapping and cheering. You can feel how personal Jerrod is being, and that this was something he'd put a lot of time and thought into, but you can tell he was, in some way, dreading that applause. It feels like applause by obligation. He saw it coming, and the jokes that follow are going to hit home with just about every queer person in existence. Because what is that applause? What's the praise for? If you think about the actual actions of being gay, divorced from the outside bigotry, it's not exactly a heroic achievement. Oh, I get to date and have sex with people I'm attracted to, that thing I've wanted to do since puberty? How will I ever work up the courage? But of course, that's not why people feel obligated to applaud. It's brave to come out because other people have decided that we shouldn't. So there's this pull between the macho ego that doesn't want the support and the actual man underneath that needs it. Because homophobia is still very much alive and well in 2022. I'm not going to say that outward, blatant, violent anti-gay bigotry has gone away. In fact, it's making a strong resurgence lately, but there's another side to it that feels just as bad, if not worse, and I've never seen a performer paint that picture so clearly before. He starts that conversation by clocking a huge portion of the at-home audience.
Like, I'm telling you guys, I know, like, some of y'all, like, I see the Yankee fitteds. Like, some of y'all are just like, oh, shit, we at a gay show, bro. This is for HBO. Like, you know how many niggas just turned the TV off? Saying to their girl right now, we gotta watch something else.
Deviation from the status quo is diagnostic. If you see a straight dude comic, there's a really good chance that half of his routine is about what he does with his dick. But no one would think of it as a straight show. Jerrod knows that to a lot of people, even people that have been fans of his for years, he's going to become a gay comic to them. Maybe they'll be overtly homophobic, but maybe they'll just assume he's going to be less relatable and therefore less funny to them now. Homophobia has layers. It's almost easier to deal with people who hate you, who say out loud that they hate you for who you are. Sometimes the bigotry that affects you the most comes from the people that love you despite.
She's trying to accept. I don't know what she's trying to do. I think she's trying to accept it. Part of me knows she's like at home trying to pray the gay away. I get a little mad sometimes. Anytime I don't match with a dude on Raya, I'm like, I bet that bitch over there. Praying to God. Wish she called me a faggot like my Uncle Junebug did. Yeah. It hurt my feelings, but I was like, nigga, your name Junebug. Like.
His mom, and a lot of moms like her, think not reacting is the best reaction. Like, as long as you don't say anything bad out loud, you can't hurt your kid. Maybe it's from growing up learning not to acknowledge the truth in front of her. Maybe it's just coming to terms with her religious beliefs. But in either case, it's wrong. Silence isn't neutral. It's why the Don't Say Gay legislation picking up steam across the country is so harmful. If you can't talk about something, that says something about it. You're not talking about it because it doesn't matter. You're not talking about it because it matters too much. Jerrod's dad was still cheating when they weren't saying anything about it. Jerrod's name is still not Jerrod, and the fact that he doesn't want to mention his real name says something about it. Jerrod is gay, and his mom doesn't want to talk about it. He didn't either, actually.
I stayed in the closet for a long time. I think because of my mom, I felt like, I mean, it's not like I could bring a dude home to her, so what's the point? You know?
The last, maybe third of this special is light on jokes. It's light on structure. It's light on performance. He's not talking at the audience, but to them. During some of the long pauses where he's trying to find the words to say next, someone in the audience will ask him a question, like a deep, personal question, and he'll answer as honestly as he can. He talks about his mom's favorite Bible verse. He talks about his guilt. He talks about how much time he should give his mom. He talks about the fear he felt of one of his parents dying without knowing. This is a comedy special, by the way. Here's why I'll defend specials like this. If he had started here, if we didn't have 30 minutes of banger jokes cluing us into who he was and where he's coming from and how he sees the world and his life, if this was a TED Talk about his coming out, it wouldn't hit this hard. Stand-up is a spoken art form, but it's about showing, not telling. You gotta show the audience why your joke is funny without telling them why your joke is funny. It builds an intuitive, involuntary connection with the audience that primes them to relate to him better than telling ever could. He earns the honesty through his comedy.
Been trying to be very honest because my whole life was shrouded in secrets, and figured the only route I haven't tried was the truth.
Rothaniel. My name's Rothaniel. Good night, everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
I know this special isn't going to appeal to everyone, and as much as I want to look down on these soulless cretins who shall not permit their clowns to cry, I have to admit that most people probably don't turn on a stand-up set hoping to bawl their eyes out. That being said, comedians are funnier when they're sincere. Jokes are funnier when they speak to a deeper truth. Sets are funnier when they form a solid connection with the audience. Rothaniel might be a funny name on its own. It's way funnier when you've come to know the man named Rothaniel. Thanks for watching.